Hello, my name is Roger Watson. I'm the Professor of Nursing at the University of Hull, and welcome to this session on dealing with research misconduct. This is one of two sessions. The other one was on dealing with publication misconduct. And just to recap, research misconduct and publication misconduct come under general research misconduct. What I want to talk about in this session are specific aspects of research misconduct. And I made the point in the previous session that publication misconduct and research misconduct are very hard to disentangle. I'll try to do that, and just to also recap, we looked last time at some specific ethical issues in publication, and actually some of these will crop up again today, but the specific ones related to publication were duplication, plagiarism, falsification, fabrication, authorship, and conflicts of interest. So we will leave those there and turn now specifically to the issues concerned with research misconduct and how research misconduct is managed by universities. Now, British universities, especially the ones who receive major research grant council money, are signed up to the UK Research Integrity Office and will conduct their investigations into research misconduct according to the advice and the guidance given by the UKRIO. So we'll have a look at the UKRIO. We'll use their definitions and their processes to explain what can happen if someone is accused of research misconduct. So the UKRIO is an independent charity offering support to the public, researchers and organisations to further good practice in academic, scientific and medical research. They promote integrity and high ethical standards in research, as well as robust and fair methods to address poor practice and misconduct. The UKRIO was established in 2006, and it aims to promote the good governance, management and conduct of academic, scientific and medical research, share good practice on how to address poor practice, misconduct and unethical behaviour, and to give confidential, independent and expert advice on specific research projects, cases, problems and issues. On the UKRIO webpage, you'll find a great deal of information about the organisation, what it stands for, and the various types of guidance that are available and how people can become involved with it. However, the procedures are governed by this booklet, which is called the Procedure for the Investigation of Misconduct in Research. This is available free to download from the UKRIO webpage as a PDF. Now, it's always good to start with a list or at least some definitions of what constitutes research misconduct, and the UKRIO booklet provides such a list. It's not exhaustive, but it's the common aspects of research misconduct, and it prefaces that by saying, in discussing misconduct in research, which could be investigated using the procedure, the following may serve as useful terms by way of guidance. Interpretation of the terms will involve judgments which should be guided by previous experience and decisions made on matters of misconduct in research. Now, the list includes some familiar old items such as fabrication and falsification, which of course we met under publication misconduct. Now, these are things which may well be discovered at the point of publication misconduct and dealt with there in terms of the actual publication, but of course if these come to light in the institution of the person carrying them out, they may have to be further investigated, and specifically under research misconduct. Then we've got misrepresentation of data and or interest and or involvement. So that includes conflicts of interest there, and your interests and involvement in the research and any interest you may have which may have influenced your interpretation of the results. Plagiarism, of course, is part of research misconduct, very much part of publication misconduct, but it doesn't only take place within the publication process. Plagiarism can take place at any stage in the research process. In other words, stealing someone else's ideas along the way. For example, some people review research grant proposals which are actually quite good, and they think they're good, and they reject them, and then they use the proposal to get their own research funded. That's a clear case of plagiarism and research misconduct. And otherwise, failures to follow accepted procedures or to exercise due care in carrying out responsibilities for and avoiding unreasonable risk or harm to humans and animals used in the research. And also the environment and the proper handling of privileged or private information on individuals collected during the research. So that covers confidentiality clauses within the research. So you can see that the potential for misconduct in research is actually quite wide, but I'm sure you can think of other areas within this where misconduct could well take place. The procedure goes on to say, for the avoidance of doubt, misconduct in research includes acts of omission as well as acts of commission. So it includes things that you may have forgotten to do or not done, as well as things that you deliberately do. Neither of these is an excuse. They must both be investigated, but it must be distinguished what led to the allegation. In addition, the standards by which allegations of misconduct in research should be judged should be those prevailing in the country in question and at the date that the behaviour under investigation took place. So it is acknowledged that there are differences in ethical procedures governing research internationally, particularly on the need to get ethical permission to do some kinds of research. There's no excuse anywhere for unethical research, but the procedures do differ. And also something that comes to light now that was carried out 10 years ago would have to be investigated in light of the regulations governing research at that time. So time and place are taken into account. Furthermore, the basis for reaching a conclusion that an individual is responsible for misconduct in research relies on a judgment that there was an intention to commit the misconduct and or recklessness in the conduct of any aspect of a research project. Where allegations concern an intentional and or reckless departure from accepted procedures in the conduct of research that may not fall directly within the terms detailed above, a judgment should be made as to whether the matter should be investigated using the procedure. So there is some leeway and some judgment allowed for the institutions and the people within institutions who are responsible for research governance. And part of that judgment is, does this fall within this procedure? If it doesn't, does it have to be investigated in this way? So the UKRIO, in order also to help guide the thinking and the processes, provide an accepted list of procedures for research. And again, these are not exhausted, but the things that are accepted and necessary parts of research are gaining informed consent where required, gaining formal approval from relevant organisations where required, any protocols for research contained in any formal approval that has been given for research, any protocols for research as defined in contracts or agreements with funding bodies and sponsors, any protocols approved by the Medical and Health Care Products Regulatory Authority for a trial of medicinal products, any protocols for research set out in the guidelines of the employing institution and other relevant partner organisations, any protocols for research set out in the guidelines of appropriate recognised professional, academic, scientific, governmental, national and international bodies, any procedures that are aimed at avoiding unreasonable risk or harm to humans, animals or the environment, and good practice for the proper preservation and management of primary data, artefacts and materials. So these are all potential codes, if you like, or internal practices and regulations that could be looked at in terms of any allegations of misconduct. Should the person have followed these? Should they have followed the internal procedure? Should they have followed agreements with external organisations? Are they under the strictures of some professional body and so forth? And that last bullet point is also interesting in terms of how data were handled. Was this done confidentially, and where required, were data then stored properly and stored for the appropriate length of time and made available, for example, under open science, if that was part of the agreement. So it's quite wide, quite a wide set of potential regulations, potential codes that can be referred to in interpreting allegations of misconduct in research. Under the accepted procedures, there are some accepted procedures that are not included. Anything unconsented to or unapproved variations of the above, anything of course that contravenes those things would be considered immediately unacceptable, or any procedures that would encourage or would lead to breaches in the law. So these things would clearly fall outside of those and would be, I'm quite sure, immediate causes for concern and investigation. So although allegations of misconduct in research are often raised as departures from accepted procedures in the conduct of research, investigations should aim to establish intentional and/or reckless behaviour as set out in the definition of misconduct in research, to which we've already referred. Now, similarly to the Committee on Publication Ethics, the UKRIO produced some flowcharts for investigating research misconduct, and they're very similar. They've got their algorithms, they've got steps and various options and what to do if the answers to one step is yes or no. And there are 3 pages of these. I'm not going to go into them in any detail. You can find them within the booklet. But they allow the investigation to come to one of 3 conclusions. Allegations are dismissed. Allegations are upheld in part. So not everything that someone's been accused of or that's been alleged may be wrong, but some parts of it may be, or the allegations are upheld in full. Of course, this doesn't, one thing that the UKRIO does not tell an institution, a governing body, or those responsible for research governance is what to do as a result of these. We will come to that later. Now, I just want to emphasise again that the UKRIO is not a policing body and does not come to a judgment on individual allegations and does not decide what happens to someone whose allegations are upheld. But they do offer advice, and there are forms provided in the booklet for communicating with them. And I'm not going to go into these in detail. I'm just going to show them, show the main parts of the form. But these would be used by someone looking for advice, for example, on what to do with a particular case. So there may well be an initial report, and then a screening follow-up, and this would be to provide any other information that's required. The conclusion of the screening panel, that can be recorded there, and there will be a UKRIO number assigned to that case. And then the formal investigation follow-up, what happened when they actually interviewed the person or carried out their investigation and were on the verge of coming to a decision. And then finally, the conclusion of the investigation panel. So the conclusion is whether the allegations were dismissed, partly upheld, or upheld. But of course, as I've emphasised already, it's up to the individual institutions to decide what happens to someone whose allegation of misconduct in research is upheld. Finally, I just want to have a very quick look at the potential consequences of research misconduct. Now, there's no published tariff for research misconduct. As I've emphasised all the way through, the decisions and what happens to an individual whose allegation of misconduct is upheld or partially upheld are in the gift of the institution investigating it. But be aware that more than one institution may investigate someone who's had an allegation of research misconduct, and they may not all deal with it the same way, although the usual procedure is for institutions to decide who's going to make the first decision and then go along with those. But just for example, a university may investigate an employee. If that employee is part of a registered professional body, such as the General Medical Council, the General Medical Council may well investigate them from the professional perspective, and the grant awarding body may also investigate them to decide if that person is ever worthy of having a grant again. And of course, if there's publication misconduct involved, as we've already looked at previously, they may well be investigated by a publisher. So the consequences can be quite wide. So the consequences that research misconduct can have are considerable, and of course they can be potentially disastrous. They can end someone's career. So for one, misconduct can irreparably erode trust among colleagues, so it can make it very difficult to work with colleagues if you're discovered carrying out research misconduct. It can erode trust between researchers and funding agencies, so they may not give you funding in future, and it may make it more difficult for colleagues at the same institution to receive grants. So research misconduct by an individual in a university can be a stain on the reputation of that university. And that's why universities are keen, of course, to train people properly to avoid research misconduct, which is also part of the program that you're undertaking here, and of course want to investigate it as quickly and as fairly as possible to show that they will not tolerate it. So penalties for research misconduct may include termination of employment, suspension or termination of a research grant, and suspension or debarment from receiving federal grants. This comes from an American website, but of course in the UK that would mean government grants, for example, from the NIHR or any of the bodies that award research grants under the main research groups, the UK research groups for the Medical Research Council and so forth, Research UK, and also the major charities. So this could have potentially very serious career consequences. So thank you very much for listening. That's my email. If you have any questions or comments, you can check my own research and publication record on ORCID. Follow me on Twitter, or if you're on WeChat, you can find me there. Once again, thank you very much for listening.